Number 1. Medieval people knew the earth was round. They had known since ancient Greece. Educated medieval scholars across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East all agreed on it, calculated its rough size, and built ships to sail around it. The flat earth medieval idiots image was largely invented in the 1800s by anti-religious writers who wanted the Middle Ages to look stupid. So you, sitting there picturing a guy in a pointy hat insisting the world ends at the horizon, congratulations. You've been doing PR for a slander campaign 200 years late. Number 2. Medieval people did not dress in dirty browns and grays. The actual Middle Ages were loud. Bright reds, deep blues, vivid yellows. The works in color was the medieval equivalent of a designer brand. Expensive dyes meant wealth, so the rich peacocked in jewel tones, and the poor imitated them with whatever cheap dyes they could afford. The dirty peasant in mud-colored sack look you're picturing? That's Hollywood. A real medieval village would have looked like a hot mess of saturated colors, and someone would have judged you for wearing beige. Number 3. They bathed constantly. Medieval cities had public bathhouses on every other street, sometimes literally next door to the church. People scrubbed, soaked, used soap, washed their hair. Some accounts describe medieval Europeans bathing more often than people did in the 1700s. The "they never washed" myth comes mostly from the post-medieval period, when bathhouses got shut down during the plague years. So the dirty, smelly night you're picturing was, on average, cleaner than your great-grandfather. Number 4. Nobody was pouring boiling oil off castle walls. Oil was insanely expensive, basically liquid money, and heating enough of it to actually defend a wall would have taken hours and risked setting your own castle on fire. There are maybe 2 or 3 documented cases in centuries of medieval warfare. What defenders actually threw was way more practical. Boiling water, hot sand, quicklime, rocks, occasionally just regular bodies of dead enemies. The murder hole was real. The deep fryer was not. Number 5. A knight in full plate armor was not a man in a tin can who had to be craned onto his horse. That's a Mark Twain joke that escaped into the textbook. Real full plate weighed around 20 to 25 kilos, about the same as a modern soldier's gear, and was so well distributed across the body that knights could mount horses unassisted, sprint, do gymnastics, even climb ladders. Number 6. The witch burnings you're picturing were not medieval. They were Renaissance. The big witch hunt panic peaked between 1500 and 1700, well after the Middle Ages ended. So when your favorite Halloween movie shows a witch getting burned in a medieval village, that's like setting Salem in ancient Greece. Medieval Europe had its problems, but it was statistically much safer to be a weird old lady in 1200 than in 1600. Progress, allegedly. Number 7. Chastity belts are not medieval. They were invented somewhere around the 17 and 1800s, mostly as a joke or for novelty museums to sell tickets. There is essentially zero archaeological evidence of any working chastity belt being used in actual medieval Europe. Number 8. The Black Death did not kill half of Europe in one terrifying afternoon. The plague rolled across the continent over about 4 years, between 1347 and 1351, and the impact varied massively by region. Some areas lost over half their population, others lost almost nobody. And even after the worst was over, the plague kept coming back in smaller waves for centuries. The Black Death was less asteroid and more the worst news cycle in human history that just would not end. Number 9. Knights were not the main soldiers of any medieval army. They were the expensive, flashy minority. An armored knight was the medieval equivalent of buying a Lamborghini. Most kings could afford a handful, max. The actual bulk of any medieval army was peasants levied to fight, mercenaries paid in cash, and professional foot soldiers. When you picture a medieval battle as wall-to-wall shining knights, you are picturing a battle no king could have afforded to host. Number 10. Spices were not used to hide the taste of rotten meat. That's both insulting and economically insane. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, and clove had to travel halfway across the world to reach medieval Europe and were so expensive they were used as currency. Nobody who could afford pepper was eating rotten meat, and nobody who could only afford rotten meat was wasting pepper on it. You don't pour Dom Perignon on a dumpster sandwich. You eat fresh, and you save the pepper for the in-laws. Number 11. Those big gray stone Gothic cathedrals you're picturing? Originally painted. Like, aggressively painted. Inside and out, in saturated reds, blues, gold leaf, ornate patterns, basically medieval acid trips made of architecture. Remember how the peasants in number 2 were wearing every color of the rainbow? Yeah, so were the buildings. The bare gray stone look you associate with medieval churches is what's left after 800 years of weather and prudish post-medieval guys scrubbing the vulgar colors off because they thought it was too flashy. For God. Number 12. Medieval Europe was not a sealed-off bubble of white Christian guys staring at their own feet. There were huge trade networks running through Byzantine, Muslim, and Mongol territory, with merchants, scholars, and diplomats from across Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa moving in and out of medieval European cities constantly. Some of the math you do in school, including the actual digits, 0 through 9, reached Europe through Muslim scholars during this period. Number 13. There were no Dark Ages. The term was invented by an Italian poet named Petrarch in the 1300s. He was a Renaissance fanboy, looked back at the previous 1,000 years, decided everyone before him was a peasant living in mud, and slapped the word dark on the entire era as Renaissance marketing. For some reason, we let him win. Because during this supposed Dark Age universities were founded. Bologna opened in 1088, Oxford and Cambridge right after. Modern banking was invented. Mechanical clocks, eyeglasses, blast furnaces. The compass and gunpowder arrived from the east. The Gothic cathedral, which still sets engineering records, was figured out by guys supposedly too dim to read. Complex math, philosophy, astronomy, all medieval. Number 14. Peasants did not work 365 days a year in a permanent state of sweaty hell. Medieval Europe was wildly Catholic, which meant a ridiculous number of saints' days, feast days, holy weeks, and religious holidays where nobody was supposed to be doing work. Estimates run as high as 150 days off per year, depending on region. Medieval peasants had a worse diet than you, but a better vacation package. Think about that the next time you negotiate PTO. Number 15. The medieval sword was not a heavy, crude club you swung with both hands hoping for the best. An arming sword weighed around 1 to 1.5 kilos, about the weight of a textbook. They were sharp, balanced, designed for precision and speed. Trained fighters used them with technical footwork, feints, binds, half-swording. Modern HEMA practitioners can move with these things in ways that would make movie sword choreographers cry. Your favorite knight wasn't swinging a crowbar. He was doing fencing. Number 16. Knights did not joust daily as part of their normal Tuesday. Tournaments were rare, ceremonial events, sometimes only a few per year, heavily ritualized, expensive to host, and pretty much the medieval Super Bowl. You didn't roll out of bed and joust the neighbor. You went off and did boring knight things, like managing the lands you owned, suing your cousin over inheritance, going to mass, and writing strongly worded letters in Latin. 95% of a knight's life was paperwork, with stabbing as a backup. Number 17. Medieval commoners did not all marry at 12. That's a noble political thing, and even then it was mostly betrothal contracts on paper. The actual wedding and living together part usually waited until both parties were adults. The average commoner couple in medieval Europe got married in their early to mid-20s, sometimes later, after the woman had saved up enough as a domestic worker to bring a dowry. Number 18. Medieval food was not gruel slop in a wooden bowl. Peasants ate bread, cheese, beans, seasonal vegetables, plenty of ale, and meat when they could get it. Nobles ate elaborate, spiced, multi-course meals with sauces complex enough to require their own dedicated chef. And the meat and potatoes peasant cliché has another problem. There were no potatoes in medieval Europe. Those didn't show up until after Columbus. So your gruel image is wrong on both ingredients and seasoning. Medieval peasants were probably eating better than your average college student. Number 19. The Crusades were not a clean two-team Christians versus Muslims story. Yes, that was the official framing. In practice, things got messy. The most famous example is the Fourth Crusade in 1204, where a Christian army, on its way to fight in the Holy Land, ran out of cash, got into a payment dispute with Venice, and instead detoured and sacked Constantinople, a major Christian city, for part. So the next time someone tells you the Crusades were a simple religious war, point them at the part where Christians looted a Christian capital because the Venetians sent them a bill. Number 20. And the big one. The Middle Ages were not one period. They were 1,000 years. 1,000. A Norman knight in 1066 had as much in common with a Renaissance-era Italian banker in 1450 as you have with someone from the 1720s. And yet we shove all of it into one bin labeled medieval, as if nothing changed for 10 centuries. Nothing changed for 10 centuries. In a span where universities, banks, gunpowder, the compass, modern cathedrals, parliaments, and entire languages emerged from the chaos. Sure, that sounds like a perfectly coherent, boring period. So here's the thing. Every single one of these myths makes medieval people sound dumber, dirtier, and grimmer than they actually were. And almost every one is wrong. They bathed, they wore color, they painted their cathedrals, they did math, they built universities and machines and laws that still run your life. Your Renaissance fair phase wasn't medieval. It was a costume of a costume. The real thing was louder, smarter, and longer than you think, and almost nothing you picture when you hear medieval actually happened the way you picture it. Anyway, that's all for today. Go correct a relative. Till next time, thanks for watching.